Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. I am the Ken Griffey Jr. of chess YouTubers. I'm trying to be the cool kid, you know what I'm saying? You know what? With something I've learned over time, you can never underestimate the power of a sound check before you actually start recording. I know some of you guys that have been around for, I've been doing this almost 2 years now. For some of you guys that have been around since the very beginning, you guys remember some videos that I used to put out. I wouldn't do a sound check and it would just sound like I was a robot or I was talking into a fan or something. So disappointing to put all that energy and effort into an entire video and for it to just be complete trash. So yes, doing the sound checks save a lot of time and headache. But I do have, they did start the classical section of Norway chess today. So I do have the game Wesley versus Teimour Radjabov taking out a round one. And it's a nice game. Teimour gets in a little bit of time trouble, so he pulls like a Alexander Grischuk. Alexander, he's always like getting in time trouble, but he's so cool like a cucumber, But anyways, for all of my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you, magandang umaga to you, magandang hapon. If you see this in the afternoon, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and taking a look at my video. Hello, ulit. Appreciate it very much. Anybody who is coming from Azerbaijan, I will say salam and chak sagol. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and taking a look at my video. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look, see what we have for this game. So we got e4. Did I do that yet? We got e4. We got e5. Knight comes to f3. We got knight to c6. Bishop to c4. Bishop to c5. Castles, knight to f6. So pretty much when you start playing the game of chess, if you have like a chess coach or something, this is like usually one of the openings they want you to learn. Kind of because it kind of like, gets you to the understanding of like developing your pieces. You got the knights out, you got the bishops out, you're getting castled and stuff. So it's a good starter, to kind of learn, how to like put your pieces in certain squares, things like that. But we do have the Italian game, and it is the two knights defense. So we do see d3, we got d6, c3, we got a5, we see rook to e1, and pretty much both sides are just doing some maneuvering, like kind of, trying to optimize their pieces. White is pushing c3, mostly to keep the knight out of b4, d4, but, you also have some ideas of pushing b4, so, the a pawn going to a5 is very common in this position, just to kind of prevent that from going there, because you really kind of like the placement of your bishop, so you don't want to get knocked away. So we do see castles by black. We got h3, h6, knight b to d2. We see bishop to e6, bishop up to b5. You're thinking of maybe possibly damaging black structure, which wouldn't really be the end of the world, but, it can be a little something. So the knight comes to d7. You see knight down to f1. We got d5. A bishop comes to e3. And, of course, if we see trades here, we're going to be taken back with the knight. And the knight is a lot better placed there than on f1. So we do see pawn takes e4. And this is the novelty of the game. I was really kind of interested how, the novelty of the game came at move 12 because these openings have been played, so heavily. So, normally you see a novelty a lot later, but that is that. We do have pawn taking e4. Of course, you got to take back because your knight's going to get, eaten if you don't take the pawn back. So we do see queen to e7. We got queen to e2. A rook is going to be swinging most likely over here to d8. So we need to kind of move our queen either to e2 or c2 or something, to get it out of the way. Like I said, rook f came to d8. We see rook e to d1. We see a4. Queen goes over to c2. We see a3. And even though earlier the pawn was pushed to a5 to prevent b4, pushing it all the way to a3 is not the absolute best. It does allow b4, which is what we see in the game b4. So now the bishop is having to try to think about what is it going to do. But, one of the problems about pushing the pawn all the way down the board is it can definitely become a target. If you could swing a knight like this here or like this here, and get a knight down to b1 and swing bishop down to c1, you have some real threats on this pawn because it is pretty overextended. So you got to be kind of careful. Bishop comes back to d6. We see knight to d2, kind of starting what I was saying. We do see knight to b6. Bishop takes b6. Pawn takes b6. Bishop comes down to c4. This is also another way, you know, if the bishop takes here, of course, we're going to take back with the knight. And we do have a lot of heat on this piece. Queen to c1 should be able to gather the pawn up for us. So we do see rook a d to c8. We got queen up to d3. Knight back to d8. Bishop takes e6. Pawn, queen takes e6. And then we do have knight to f1. We're looking for some free bishops. This bishop is looking mighty tasty. This queen is like, bro, I'm hungry. Like, I'm trying to get a bishop, right? But of course, Radjabov is not going to be having any of that. So we do see bishop back to f8. We got knight up to e3. And like I said earlier in the game, I mean, you know, we might be able to kind of get this knight up to, you know, d5 or f5. And since black does not have a light squared bishop, there isn't a lot that they can do about you plopping your knight in one of these light squares. So you got to be careful when you're trading bishops off. You might be leaving some holes. So we do see f6. Knight comes up to d5, like beautiful octopus knight. The knight comes to f7. We see knight down to d2. We see rook down to a6, rook a to b1. And then we see the move b5. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not really sure what b5 is doing. Because it's pretty much just like a free pawn. I mean, there probably wasn't a lot you really could have done with it anyway. I mean, you do have double pawns here, so you're you know, your structure's not the best. So I feel like maybe you kind of have to get rid of it. So that's what he does. Queen takes b5. We see knight to d6 attacking the queen on b5. The queen comes down to d3, and now this makes much more sense with b5. But the position is getting kind of dire for black. Yeah, the position is getting kind of dire for black, and you are down an entire pawn. So, you know, this is pretty much white's game to just keep, like, pressing their advantage. So we do see rook b to c1. We got rook a to c6. The rook comes up to c2. You know, we're hoping to try to push this pawn up here. You know, of course, like, discover a nice little attack on that a3 pawn. That was overextended earlier. So we do see f5. As you can see, black is doing a really good job at, like, you know, trying to drum up counterplay, like, wherever he can. He knows he's down a pawn, so he needs to, like, drum something up to get something rolling. Attack somehow, right? So we do see pawn taking f5, knight taking f5. We got knight over to b3, which is perfectly trying to redirect the knight to somewhere more useful. Also, it you know, it moves the knight out of the way so that we have a nice little battery with the queen and the rook. So we do see rook to c4, and then a really nice find is knight to a5. And now you see this rook doesn't really have anywhere to go. All of the squares that it would try to retreat to are completely covered. You might, I mean, you kind of have the ability to go over here, but I mean, that's still not looking the best. Also, you don't really want your rook just kind of hanging out on the edge of the board. There's not a whole lot of attack that's going to be occurring right here. So the knight is a little trappy. So we do see e4, and we have actually reached a point in the game that if you don't want to pause the video and see what nice move Wesley So comes up with in this position, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So, some of you guys might notice, I think a lot of you guys might notice, anybody who watches my videos, you know, all the time I literally talk all day about undefended pieces. Now, in black's position, there is only one undefended piece. These rooks are defended. This knight is defended by the queen. The bishop is, you know, doubly defended with the king and the rook, right? So the queen is actually just kind of hanging out in space by itself, right? So one of those things you can take advantage of is the queen being undefended, and the move is rook to e2. So if you found rook to e2, then you'd be thinking, man, I don't even care if my queen dies because your queen's gonna die, right? You know, if that's how you're thinking. But that's literally the exact thought of the game. You know, it puts you in a very nice position, and it gives you a favorable position going into an endgame. And that is, you know, what you want to do. You want to have a favorable endgame going forward. So we do see rook to e8, and something I'll note, you know, Radjabov, he was under a minute at this point. Now you start the game with 120 minutes, so you literally have 2 hours each, right? And so to get down to less than a minute, like you literally burned all the time away. Wesley so had like 20 minutes at this point, so he's doing much better time wise. So you know, Radjabov is really having to kind of fly these moves out. He doesn't have a lot of time to really think about what's going on. So you know, he's not making the most accurate moves, which is understandable if you're under a minute. I mean, you're not going to be playing computer like. So we do see rook to e8. We got knight taking c4. We see pawn taking d3, rook taking e6, rook taking e6, and then we do have finally that pawn being captured on a3, the one that I was saying was overextended from way earlier. And it is actually in this position that with 2 seconds on his clock, Teimour Radjabov resigns the game. You're basically losing on time, and you're losing. I mean, it's just a really, really horrible position to be in. You are down now at this moment 2 pawns. You're going to be down more pawns later on. Even if you had an hour to play this position, you know, you're going to just be literally losing pieces. And to show you just a sample variation of what that would look like, you know, the knight would come up to d6. Defending the pawn on b5. Of course, you don't want to keep losing pawns. And then after the knight comes up to c7, not only is it double attacking that pawn, but it is attacking the rook as well. So the most active move for you to try to do would be rook to e2. The rook would take on d3, and then after the rook takes a2, rook a captures on b5, and you are down 3 entire pawns, and the pieces are equal. So, you know, you're not even like up a piece and down 3 pawns. So this is just literally, you can't win this at all unless you just completely blunder the game away by, like, you know, putting your rook, let's say you like put your rook like right here or something like that. Or no, wait, let's say white does something bad. Let's say like white just like says, hey man, I don't care about my piece. What is it? Okay, hold on. It's black's move. So let's say just black makes a random move. Let's just do this or something. I mean, if black just says, hey man, I don't like my pieces at all, and just does this, I mean, that gets black back into the game. I mean, you just go ahead and do that and you're up a piece. But that's the only thing you can do to literally come back in this type of a position. So I really appreciate everybody stopping by very much. Hopefully this video does pretty well. I released a video yesterday that did fairly well. I definitely got accustomed to getting a lot of views, like thousands and tens of thousands of views at one point for my channel, but it's been a very, very long time since I've had views like that. And I really miss it. I miss all the comments and, you know, stuff like that going back and forth. It was a great time. So hopefully that comes back again. So thank you for watching this video very much. Chak sago to you. Maraming salamat aking makaibigan. Mikiro tayo mamaya, and I will see everybody next time.